Hello and welcome back. This is a little bit different of an episode today. I have on the show Dr. Dawn Kulongowski, and she has a podcast now with Alan Mead, Dr. Alan Mead from the Dental Hacks podcast called The Peaceful Practice. And so you're going to get a taste of that in this podcast today. And I apologize in advance if I am too open with like the crap that's going on in my life and what I'm working through. And if you can't relate to that, that's totally okay. But I do want to shout out to George and for him sharing some of the things that he's been through in the last year recently on our show, which also led to me reaching out and getting help and working through some stuff. And then as well to Ellen Broen, which is Matt's wife. And she is an amazing coach, and she's been kind of mentored me through this process as well. So this is a topic today that I am obsessively excited about right now in my life personally. So if you were to look at my podcast app, you would see that like almost half of the podcasts have something to do with like mindfulness or meditation. And I've taken a lot of deep dives, and I wanted to introduce that to the show. And we're going to bring this back. We're doing it on an individual level with this episode, and we're going to have another episode, a follow-up one, about how to kind of bring this to your practice and the difference it can make there. So I'm excited for you guys to meet Dr. Dawn Kulongowski. She is hilarious. I love her laugh. I love having her on the show. And so hopefully we'll get her back here soon. Okay, welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. I have with me back, we just did an interview on Sandy's podcast, Dawn Kulongowski. Dr. Kulongowski, you have a hard last name to say and to spell, but I think I did okay.
You did perfectly. You did better than 99.99% of people. I think what happens with the name, because I actually don't think my name is that hard, but I live in this name though,
Sure.
But what happens is when it's long, people just instantly get overwhelmed. They look and they go, "Oh, where do I start?" It's like, well, you start at the beginning.
I don't know how to read it anymore. It's too long. I can't read that word.
Yeah. No, I hear you. But at least I don't have like too many consonants in a row. I didn't get that Polish nonsense.
That's true.
So mine is a little better, but I get it. It's an obstacle. And I had a patient call me Dr. Kulongowski once. So that's still in there.
Oh my goodness. Wrong end. We don't deal with that.
Exactly. I don't do that part. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've been attempting to connect with you over today's topic of mindfulness and meditation. And then before the call, I had in my mind, I was thinking, okay, we'll talk about this. You brought in a whole nother layer that actually makes this so much better for this season. So this season is on leadership, culture, and change. And meditation and mindfulness, we'll get into here in a second, is something on an individual level that can be absolutely life-changing.
Yes.
And you have done programs where you introduce this to a whole office and then collectively, teach this individually and then bring it back collectively to the office's culture and the group IQ of the whole office and how you work together and communicate. So we might have to split this into 2 episodes because there's so much to cover here.
Up to you. You do what you need to do with your little thing here. Yeah. 1, 2, 8. Who knows?
This is great. So for someone who is completely unfamiliar with meditation and mindfulness and why this should be on their radar, give us kind of your experience, your story, and the value that you see in this for dentists.
Gosh, well, there's an hour right there.
Sure. That's what I think it's going to be too.
No, so I found meditation probably on accident,
Okay.
but it was an act of desperation. I went to dental school. I always wanted to be a doctor. I thought being a doctor was the greatest thing you could be. I grew up in a small town, you know what I mean? And to me, doctor was the smart one. I always wanted to do that. And dentists are doctors that work regular office hours. So it was a perfect fit for the life that I wanted. And I confess that I didn't have a lot of idea about what dentists did specifically.
You're like, yeah, sounds great.
But I knew, yeah, exactly. But I kind of knew that the life would be what I wanted or what I thought I wanted. But, when we're 15, life looks very different than it does when we're 35. And so I did all the things. I jumped all the hoops. I knew when I was in high school, probably maybe even middle school, that I wanted to be a dentist. So I jumped through all the hoops. I did all the things. I kept my grades up, um, and I managed to get into dental school, and then I survived that. I know I've heard you talk about your dental school experience. I think I was on the other end of that. I'm a little older than you. I was on the whips and chains version of dental school.
Right.
And it's emotional whips and chains. They were very cruel. I have nothing positive. I There were several professors that you couldn't get enough of their time because they
Mm,
were the nice ones, and so everyone was swarming them, and the rest of them, they were emotionally abusive. So a lot of us left with scars,
right.
and addictions and low self-esteem, or you started with low self-esteem and they only made it worse.
Or worse.
It
Yeah.
was a horrible environment, but
You
I
survived it
I
more than
survived it,
yeah.
and I feel like it was a sacrifice. So you're like, "Okay,
Mm.
well, I'm gonna sacrifice my present happiness to get to this thing, and then
Oh, yeah.
when I get to that thing, I'm
Then you're
just
gonna
gonna
be happy.
then I'm gonna be happy." Well, that's a lie, turns out. Um
Which I think, our whole podcast sets up practice ownership as this, like, landmark of, okay, once I'm a
Yeah.
practice owner, then I'm gonna be happy.
But then what? That's
Yeah.
the problem. So, yeah, when I speak, when I do my introduction, I do I tell the story of having a checklist in life.
Mm,
Because we all had that checklist. Now, most of us didn't write it down, and I didn't either. But I very much believed that when I got to the bottom of this list, and the list kind of did end at dental school,
mm,
finishing that and get married, have a kid, that kind of stuff. But when I got to the bottom of the list, I was anything but happy. I was quite overwhelmed.
mm.
I wasn't coping well. I was stressed out. I had chronic headaches. Your back hurts all the time. Chronic pain is very easy to fall into when you're not happy.
Right.
It does. It just adds. It feeds the fire.
Totally.
Wasn't sleeping good, and I didn't really like what I was doing every day.
Mm.
I felt, I think you're already a little beaten and you're tired, and then the disappointment sets in that it's not some fantasy, and that happiness didn't arrive with
Was
the
this
dental
post
degree.
dental school? Is this, like, as an
Yeah, I would
associate,
say,
just as an
well, as
owner?
an associate, so there's where you start adding to the list. You're like, okay, I'm at the bottom of the checklist. I did this. Yes, I'm
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
And then you go into that first job and you're like, this job sucks.
Right, right.
And you go, it's the job. Because my first associateship, I didn't really even know the senior doc. He hired me so he could have a couple of days off. So I never saw him. We were ships that passed in the night.
Mhm.
And so there was no guidance there. The assistant was the best thing I had as far as information on what we were doing today.
Right.
And I didn't really even have auxiliary staff. I had the assistant, and she would do the front desk too. Like, we would take
Oh my
turns with that.
goodness.
Yeah, it
Wow.
was a weird
All
situation, small office. And I wasn't happy there, so I did a different job, and I wasn't happy there, and I did a different job, and I wasn't happy there.
yeah.
So then it was, okay, I'm going to buy a practice. That's it. This is that's the
Solve all the
golden,
problems.
yes, that is the prize at the end of the tunnel. No. So I bought a practice in 2005, and there were just a lot of problems. And that's just kind of life. I know that now, right?
Right.
Now I look at life differently because of my meditation practice. But um I thought happiness was a place I would arrive to when I got to the end of that list.
Mm,
And I never knew, sadly, until I was probably 36 or 7, that is absolutely not true. Happiness is never in tomorrow. Happiness isn't going to happen after that next thing. If you can't find happiness right here, right now, it's not out there for you.
yeah.
So that becomes the work. The work is to stop it with the list and thinking it's external. It's out there somewhere. I just have to go find it. I have to achieve it. I have to buy it.
Mhm.
That's where we think it is. Happiness, joy, contentment, fulfillment, those are states of being that exist inside of us from birth.
Mm,
We just got buried. You get buried. Your mom told you not to wear that, and the teacher said that you didn't do a good job, and you get buried under all that stuff, and your happiness kind of gets covered.
right.
And through your meditation practice, you can kind of start uncovering that and realizing that happiness isn't out there somewhere. It's in you, and you bring it into moments.
Mm.
But that was no one ever explained that to me. And if they did, I wouldn't have understood it
Well,
when I was still in that accomplishment frame of mind.
and it's so easy to think, whether it's dental school, done with dental school, or when I've got a handle on student loans, or when I've got the house, or when I'm financially free and no longer have to do dentistry, or all of these different things. You can always put that goalpost further out.
Correct. We can I call that giving happiness to tomorrow.
Mm,
So happiness, I can't have it today because today I got to do the work.
right.
Whatever that is, fill in the blank. It could be a thousand things. Or I got to get the thing. And so it's always tomorrow. And I can tell you as a person, and I'm sure you won't disagree with this, that when that goalpost, you will do reach them. You do
Mm,
reach them. We do check
yeah.
the box, right?
Yep.
And then what happens?
There's other stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or maybe you're happy for a couple days, like the first weekend at the cottage up north is great.
Right.
And then the pipes break in the middle of winter. And you know what I mean? Like life
Sure.
comes back in. So there's no oasis from the reality of that there's a certain amount of pain in life.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's no oasis from that. Don't get me wrong, there's temporary ones, but it's not something that's achieved. And think about how far out the normal pattern of putting it is. I know many dentists that I have known for 15 years, which means I've known them since they were baby dentists, and they're now on a path to retirement. That's their only hope. They've given up on the dental career being fulfilling, and they're like retirement. That's where it's
So
at.
so some of those people, and I know some of the people you're talking about because
They're very
on
vocal about it. Some of them.
Yeah, on Dental Town, I remember reading these posts in dental school of these dentists who had their date to the day,
Yes.
and their McMansions and other things that you know who we're talking about here, that
Yes.
that really were just miserable, and that actually had a huge impact on me in dental school because I thought, "I don't want dentistry to be a trap for me
Mhm.
and just like a sprint to get through it so that I can get to retirement," and caused me to do my residency because I thought
Mhm.
maybe if I'm doing more of the procedures I enjoy and less of the procedures I don't enjoy,
Yep.
um, and made me think, what can I set up in my life as a sustainable relationship with dentistry,
Mhm.
rather than having to feel like I hate this golden
It's
handcuffs.
just something else I gotta get through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
It's like
those things
childbirth. How long
those
is this gonna last? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they really affected me. So it's just interesting to hear you talk about some of these same
So
people.
funny, and again, it's an age difference thing, and how old are you? Do you mind me asking?
I am 33.
Okay, so I've got a decade on you. But so the difference in that decade can be huge because when I
Mhm.
was a student, I mean, I had email. We didn't
Right,
really use it.
right,
So I graduated from dental school in 2002. I found Dental Town in 2004.
right,
And that was my first experience socializing, and I put that with the bunny ears, socializing online. That
right.
it wasn't something like I've met dentists that like, grew up sort of in with social media, and I go,
Totally.
that's still very new for me.
Right.
So I didn't there wasn't a place to go. And maybe that's a good thing because I'm hearing you and I'm
There
like, that
we
would
go.
scare me. I'd be like, oh God, all these people are miserable.
Yeah. It was a combo. It's good.
No, I get that. It motivates you to look at it differently. And maybe
Yeah.
it brought you to that place sooner. Maybe it brought you to the place where realizing that happiness is not a goalpost and neither is fulfillment. But we that is the most common human pattern of living is to give your happiness to tomorrow. I'll be
Mm,
happy when I get to my vacation. I'll be happy when I have another kid. I'll be happy when and when and when and when and when. And then the when happens and you're happy for maybe, I don't know, a couple hours, couple days. And I've put happy in quotes there because it's just an emotion at that point. It's not
sure.
a state of being, it's an emotion that you're experiencing. And just like any other emotion, it's a cloud in the sky that floats by.
Comes and goes.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's mixed with other things through the day. So those things don't last. They don't
And
last.
so
When your happiness and your fulfillment depend on something external to yourself, it does not last. Those things are all impermanent. All of
no,
them.
and sometimes it turns around and it's the opposite where the things that you wanted the most, you get there and you realize this isn't what I thought it would be, and I'm not happy at all.
When
So
was it ever what you thought it would be? I mean, that's an interesting thing in and of
true.
itself. Like so many experiences, like having a baby. There's one. I don't even remember the first year of my daughter's life, barely, because you're so sleep deprived.
Blur, yeah.
So it's like, was it this joyous, wonderful thing? Probably on some level, yes.
Certain
But there's
moments.
a lot of other stuff going on that makes it a little bit of a mishmash of emotions and states of being. As far as I just remember being tired for a really long
Mm,
time, but you put all your hopes on that, and then you're like, oh wait, this didn't make me feel like I thought I was going to. And if you're lucky, at some point you figure out that you're looking in the wrong places. But we don't all have that luck, right?
so
Too
what was
many.
that moment for you?
Well,
So When did this, like, intersection of I'm not happy and mindfulness coming along, meditation coming along, how did that happen?
Well, so I had played with meditation for years. So
Okay.
I had played with it. I had a friend who was really into it, and it's definitely something that it wasn't unknown to me. So I had read books.
Mm,
I read a book by Deepak Chopra when I was a senior in high school.
okay.
And I still it was called Ageless Body, Timeless Mind.
Mm,
And I remember reading it and not I probably didn't understand it at all. You know what I
mm,
mean? Like, but I did glean some things from it that made me think that there was a different way of being in the world.
mm,
One thing he said was one a quote from that book that I still remember 25 years later was that every worldview creates its own world. And I
okay.
remember pondering that, like, I'm 17, I don't even understand. But I remember thinking there was some real meat in that quote.
Yeah,
But I couldn't really wrap my head around it, so
yeah,
it was something that was out there, and I would play with guided meditations, those were readily available on the internet, and Oprah would do the things every now and again, and my mom was a
right.
stay-at-home mom, so it was soap operas and Oprah every day, and so we so I remember Oprah having those things and playing with it a little bit, but not really getting it, and, the way I was coping with being not really happy in my everyday you know, life as a practice owner was escape.
Mm,
So I would go, happiness was vacation. And again, happiness
mhm,
was somewhere else, right? So it was it was vacation. And I would, I would live for vacation. So whether that was with my family or going with a friend, anything to get out of the environment for some period of time. But I also managed to ruin most vacations by counting down the days. Have you ever done that? You're like,
You
"I have
dreaded
7 days till I have to go back. I have 6 days. I only
oh,
have 5 days." Like
right.
you do the dreaded countdown of when you have to go back, so
Yeah,
you ruin your whole vacation that way. But a friend and I would go on these, like, meditation type retreats, and I had been
mm,
on several, and the same thing, I would go there and, most of these places that are designed for meditation retreats are super luxurious, or at least the ones we were
mm.
going to. So, because I've been to
When you
one
say retreat, how long were these ones
couple
that you're
days, because
okay,
you
so
can't
like
get
a
away from the
weekend
office.
type yeah, a weekend retreat,
Yeah,
not like
like
a
that kinda
10-day
No, 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 no.
yeah,
I've done a week, but that, later developments. Because getting
sure.
away for a long period of time is not easy, especially not
No,
with a young child
right,
and your mom, you know what I mean? Like, being mom is different. I so mom can't go away for too long,
right.
and, getting away from the office, another huge issue, that's so hard, and, every practice owner knows that. If nothing else, coping with the guilt of going away is tricky.
Yeah,
So we would go away for these, couple day retreats. I think maybe 5 days we would do that kind of thing. But
sure.
they're, resorts. So these places are built, these are environments built to create peace and calm.
It's like a spa.
Yeah, they have beautiful spas
Mm,
and, gardens, and it smells good and the food is good and you're very pampered. And
mhm,
so, but that's not realistic, right? So you're like, if only I could live here. If only I could
right.
live here,
This is
then
my life.
everything would be so perfect. But who can do that?
Right.
Um, and then you go home and you're like, well, maybe I can create an environment like that at home. And you buy new sheets and new pillows, and
It's
some
the environment.
candles. Yeah,
Yeah.
you like send some scented candles. You're like, maybe I can make it. But generally, it's hard to escape completely ever. Not, in the days of cell phones and computers. And actually, it's funny because there are some of these resorts, they will take your phone from you. You leave it at
Oh,
the desk.
wow.
Like, that's an option you can choose, but I don't know
Yeah,
how anyone can do that and stay sane.
yeah.
I've never done it. I hate to say, but I have
That's
never done it.
amazing. Yeah.
Um, so I would go to those places and I would meditate when I was there, but meditation in my brain at that point was very much something that you did in that environment.
Mm,
So you would feel good when you were there, you would feel good when you did it, but it was something that you then left when you left the resort and returned to
mhm.
your normal kooky life, which
Yeah,
happened very quickly. Very quickly. As the plane isn't even on the ground yet, and you're already back at your office thinking about all the
miserable.
things you gotta do. Yeah.
Yeah.
The pile of charts is overflowing onto the floor when you get there. So, I went on a retreat. It was a very different retreat. It was my turn to choose. This friend and I
Mhm.
that would do these together. So I just picked something that was convenient timing, and it was a person I had been seeing around. His name is David G. And I'd been seeing him around just social media, and I had gone on his website, and he looked interesting to me. He looked a little different as far as, what you think of a meditation teacher looking like.
Sure.
Like we all have these stereotypes, and he has long white hair and a long white beard. Don't get me wrong. But he also has a very strong New York accent. And and he's not,
Okay.
he's there's no pretense of I'm an enlightened being, like there's none of that.
Sure.
He's just very much a regular guy.
Yeah.
And so we went to this resort in the oh god, Adirondacks. I'm like, what are those
Okay.
mountains in upstate New York? Yeah. So the
Okay.
Adirondacks, and there was nothing around. So there wasn't it, and there was no spa.
Mm.
So,
You're like, "What?
and
This
I'm
is
like,
the
what are
wrong
we gonna
resort.
do?
What are we
And they
doing?"
had woolly blankets. I was like, ew, woolly blanket.
Oh,
I
wow.
it's like, who wants woolly
I'm
blankets?
itching just thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly. I'm itchy with the wool. My husband loves that crap, but I can't stand it.
Yeah.
Um, so it was beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it was very different. It wasn't an environment created for this. It was actually that retreat house was owned by Syracuse University, I believe.
Mm. Okay.
And it was a place where they would have, retreats for various purposes. So it wasn't set up for meditation. There were like a lot of dead animals stuffed and
Oh,
like that's a no-no at any, like
yeah.
you won't see dead
That's
things at a
not a
meditation.
Buddhist thing there. Yeah.
No. So it was kind of funny, like you'd be in the little great room and there'd be like dead owls staring at you. It was very different. But it was very different from beginning to end in that this was very much a retreat where you signed up to spend time with the teacher, which
Mm.
was not the usual experience I was having at those things either. So David G had a schedule and we meditated every morning at sunrise for half an hour. And then we had like class, I would call it roughly, like a kind
Mm.
of a lecture situation. And we would learn all these different skills. It was the launch event for his book, Distressifying.
Okay.
And that book, God, I mean, if you want the greatest book ever written about secular meditation and how to turn your life into something different, I really think that is just the best starting place. And I use it
Okay.
a lot when I teach. So he divides your life into 5 areas and says, here's what you need to do if you want a different life. And he lays it out. It's a map. And it's fantastic. And it's not all that hard. It's awareness. It's like, oh yeah, I am aware now that the reason I get angry when someone says that to me is because you know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's just awareness tools. So we learned a lot of those in that
Mm.
weekend. And I left there committed to continuing to meditate. Because for the first time, someone was real with me about it. It wasn't like
Mm.
this mystical thing that only special people did, and you really only meditate if you get it together. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Right.
Like, that's something people who get it together do.
Sure.
No one has it together, just so so we're
Yeah.
all on the same page. No one has it together. Some people like to pretend that they do, and other of us buy into their lies. But it is absolutely untrue that anyone has it all together. It's just not real. It's not real. And it's something we should let go of the expectation that we would ever have that. And we need to stop putting that pressure on ourselves. So I left there with a certain level of comfort with being a regular human being that I had not had prior.
Mm.
And I knew I got that because I had been forced to meditate. I don't know how many too many times a day.
Yeah. No, and these meditation retreats, like the ones that are less spa-like and more retreat-like, they can be quite rigorous.
Yes. Yes. And
Like a
some of
lot
them
of time on the cushion, you're going a little crazy.
yes, and I know, like, I've done a lot of retreats with David G now, and, he has a very defined I would say very defined he doesn't have any plan at all. Do you know what
Mm.
I mean? Like, it's not super laid out as far as from he gives you times to show up.
Mm.
So, you show up at the time, you have no idea what you're getting into, you just show up there, and that's part of his thing. He wants to knock you off your comfort a
Your
little bit.
expectations,
'Cause me,
yeah.
I wanna know, it's like, "Oh, from 10 to 12, we're gonna be talking about, name
Right.
something, and we're gonna be doing this activity, and it's gonna look
You
like
want your
this."
cheat code at the end,
I
you
do,
know?
exactly, and then you're gonna tell me a stupid word, and I'm gonna write it down and put it in the computer later. So that is hard for me, but because it's hard, I know I need to do it.
Yeah.
So for me, I'll be like, "What are we doing at noon?" And he's like, "Just show up," like
Don't worry about
like, "Whatever, what do you care?" Um, but it throws you off your comfort enough that it opens you to trying something
it.
new.
Mm.
And that's what a lot of us need. I see so much resistance. People like the idea of meditation, but they're real scared of it. So, getting knocked off your regular routine or your control, the illusion of control we all carry around. Because if I know what I'm doing at noon, you know what I and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
reliable and I can count on it. But he also, there's a lot of sleep deprivation involved, at least for me. I like my sleep. And, when I'm done at 10:30 at night with him and then I have to be up at 5
Oh,
for
dang.
meditation, I'm, like, exhausted. And I said that
Yeah.
to him one day. I'm like, "Dude," I'm like, "I'll do anything, just let me sleep tomorrow." I And he laughed. He's like, "But that's part of the thing." Because
Mm.
it's another thing that if you're a little bit tired, you're a little less up to fighting the idea that you're gonna try this meditation stuff.
Like, wearing you down?
I
Like,
don't know that it's a wear down as much as it's an opening up.
okay.
Does that make sense? Because some of it, if you're really regimented, like so many of us tend to be, and
Yeah.
you plan the seasons of your podcast. No one does
Right.
that. So I know
Right.
you're like that too.
True. No, you're not wrong.
But it gives you this illusion of comfort and control.
Yeah.
And it's working for you, quote unquote. Working for you just means you're comfortable in it. It doesn't mean it's actually serving you, right?
True.
So it creates this illusion of comfort. So I think removing you a little bit from your comforts and showing you something else is a valuable life exercise because that something else might be better. Maybe that thing that made you comfortable, because I think a lot of us, we develop the habits that we have as students when we were, go back to whenever, middle school if you want.
Yeah.
And then we just stuck with that forever. Well, the stuff you were doing in middle school might not be so great when you're 40. It might not
No.
serve you in the same manner that it did. Um, and so going through those exercises that kind of just get you out of the rut that you're stuck in, as far as all these rituals that you've created and your illusion of control, it was useful to me.
Mm.
So I made the commitment that weekend to a daily meditation practice. And I also signed up the night I got home for the teacher training. So
Mm.
David G does teacher training, and I signed up for teacher training the night I got home.
Cool.
And I did that because I wanted to learn everything I could possibly learn about this thing that
You're
felt very new.
all in.
I was like, this is it. This is the key to something different. This is the key to that happiness isn't somewhere tomorrow. It's right here. It's right here. I just need to access it better.
So I want to ask you some specifics here. What did your meditation practice look like on a day-to-day basis? Like, how much meditation were you doing at this time
Back then,
back then? Yeah.
well, okay, so my meditation practice, because I had come fresh off the retreat, was exactly what we were doing on the retreat: half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening.
Okay.
So, that's a big dive, and I never recommend that for my students because I didn't
Mm.
have them locked in the mountains for 4 days first. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's
Right.
totally different. It's hard, that you get knocked off your routine in a kind of a major way. It's easier to start a new routine. When you're in that old routine and you're trying to introduce something new into it, that's a trick. That's real
Mhm.
difficult, and it can be. So I tell people to start with 5 minutes in the morning, and then every week add a minute.
Mm. Interesting. I love that. That's so reasonable. And
That's
5 minutes, the first time you sit down to meditate, whether you're using an app, whether, whatever you're doing, 5 minutes can feel like a long
Yeah,
time.
that's what I find. And so here's the thing. I'm at 5 years deep into my daily meditation practice. And I will tell you that still some days half an hour is 30 years.
Yeah.
And some days half an hour was 5 seconds.
Right.
That's just how it is. But that's part of the process, right? So Sharon Salzberg describes meditation as getting used to it. And she's using that. It's a word from the language that the Buddha spoke. His teaching of meditation, the word translates to getting used to it.
Mm.
Getting used to what? The ups and downs of life? How
Be-
life is?
Being alive.
Being exactly. It's getting used to this human experience.
Yeah.
So I really like that turn of phrase. I think it's a good turn of phrase if you kind of understand how the process works. But that getting used to it, and then that idea that some days it feels like, oh my God, how can it still be going on? It's only
Yeah.
13 minutes. 13 minutes. That's how I feel when I run, by the way. Sometimes 0.2 miles, I'm like, is it over yet? And then other days
Right.
it's like you just go. That's just how life is. So this process trains you to just kind of get used to that.
So we're talking about terminology here. There's another. It was on you and Alan's new podcast, which I guess this would be a good time to bring that up.
Yeah.
That where you described mindfulness versus meditation.
Correct.
So
How
What's
do I
the distinction?
differentiate this? Well, okay, so
Yeah,
mindfulness is a term that has become misused and overpopular.
yeah,
And I think the reason for that is because people are afraid of the word meditation, but mindfulness sounds like it could be okay.
right, right.
So it's a little bit of trying to trick people into trying something new. But in my teaching and in the way I was trained, I've done 2 separate levels of teacher training now. So,
Mm,
in the way I was trained, meditation is what you do on the pillow. So
mhm,
meditation is your formal practice. It's the exercise that I'm doing for half an hour in the morning where I sit, I bring my attention and my awareness to my breath, I let it rest there, and then I just kinda drift off into thought like we all do, right? And then you bring your attention back. You catch yourself, you go, "Oh, wait, I'm not supposed to be over here. I'm thinking about, I don't know, what I gotta make for dinner." And I go, "Wait, not right now. Right now, it's just me and the breath." And so I come back to the breath. So that's my meditation, right?
yeah,
Mindfulness is doing that not on the pillow.
mm,
I'm having a conversation with my husband and he's stressed out about work and I'm back to thinking about what I got to make for dinner and there's a load of laundry in the dryer that needs to be folded. I'm not giving him my full attention. So I catch myself and I go, "No, the laundry can wait. He needs my attention right now." And I bring myself back. So meditation is the formal practice that helps you train
mm.
to your brain to catch yourself over and over again as you drift off into thought or any other distractions. And then mindfulness is how we bring that to our waking life, to our moment to moment life.
And I feel like mindfulness is almost like the payoff of
It
the time that you
is.
you you have on the
Yes.
cushion.
Yeah,
So it's
because
like
yes,
you you
you get it.
you you put in this time of like, okay, I'm watching my breath, not for the sake of like, this is what my entire life should be, watching my breath,
Right.
but when you're with your child and they're trying to get your attention and they're excited about something and you're kind of like halfway on your
Yep.
phone or you're thinking about something else
Mhm.
and you can catch yourself and realize, oh, I'm not giving this person who means more to me than anything on my phone my full attention and presence. And it's a gradual process of getting a little bit better at
Right.
noticing when you're distracted and you're off and bringing it back to the moment, bringing it back to the current experience.
Correct, and I think you've got it dead on, but I think you've got it dead on because you know this stuff, right? You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like, it's not
yeah,
foreign to you. Like I said, I'm used to talking to people, they don't have a clue what I'm talking about. They've heard the words and they're interested because 'cause they've heard there's science behind it and everything, but they
right,
don't get
right.
what it does. And I also encounter a lot of people, they're looking for a quick fix.
Mm,
So they're like, "I feel crappy right now. What can I do?" And it's like, "Well, you can start a meditation practice right now." Eh,
it's
you
gonna be hard right now.
Yeah, it is. It is hard right now, but I've been pushing people to do it. I have been challenging
Yeah,
people right now when you have time, and I know the distractions are many. This is a good exercise for you. Sit down, feel your breath. When's the last time you felt what it actually felt like to take a
mm,
breath? The thing you're doing all day long, you do it all day long because if you didn't, you wouldn't be here. But you don't even know you're doing it. And that's
right.
kind of it's a metaphor for life. We're just doing, doing, doing all day long. We don't even know what we're doing. You ask me what I did at the end of the day, I have no idea what I did. I just did stuff. I
Yeah,
mean, and that's how many of us we just lose our whole life that way.
yeah,
And I think, people say, "Oh, life gets so fast. It's getting away from me." It's like, well, you're getting away from it because you're allowing your brain to carry you off wherever it sees fit in every given moment. So I use this example a lot. How many times do you get in the car to drive somewhere and you just appear there? You have
right.
no memory of the drive. You were there the whole time and you should have been paying attention, but
On
you
complete autopilot the entire time.
exactly. And where was your brain? What were you thinking about? You don't even know.
All the things you had to do and some conversation that you had 3 months
Yes,
ago
some
or
nonsense.
someone that, you're worried how they're gonna react to something
Yes.
that, is gonna happen in the future that you can't do anything about right now while you're in the car
No,
driving.
you're just what ifing the whole way there.
Yeah.
It's a waste, and that's how we waste our lives. We waste our lives because we're never fully present.
Mm.
Krishna Das, I was at a retreat, it seems like a year ago, but it was actually at the beginning of March.
That's a different
Yeah,
lifetime, the
in the
beginning of March.
in the before times, but Krishna Das said, and I've been saying this a lot, when I've been talking about this stuff, he said, "Most of us are gonna die without ever actually spending a moment here."
Mm,
And it's so profound because it's true. We're so busy, we're so distracted, we're thinking about nothing that we're doing. We're never actually doing anything. When you're washing the dishes, you're making a grocery list. You're not actually
Right.
washing the dishes. I mean, don't get me wrong, you're getting it done, but you're not experiencing anything.
Do you know what makes this worse? Podcasts.
Because it gives you something to think about while you're washing the dishes? Yeah.
Because you're no longer I mean, the funny thing about meditation for me is that, I chronically feel like I need to have some sort of audio book, podcast, something
Yeah.
else going at all times. I've got my Bluetooth headphones around my neck, currently have them right now as we're
Oh,
recording
that's
this,
so funny.
so that at any moment,
You're double headphoned.
you just pop in that little earbud and so that you don't have to be present in the present moment. Like,
Yeah.
it's almost to the point where we can be constantly escaped, um,
But are you?
between us.
And I would challenge you there, are you? Because how much so when you're doing say, okay, so I get up in the morning and I'm just making this up. So I say I get up in the morning and I go to get my coffee. So I get my coffee, sit down with my coffee, and I go, oh, it's too quiet. No one wants to be
Mm,
alone with their thoughts. So I'm going to put the podcast on.
mm,
And then while I'm on my phone, I notice I have 6 emails. So I start looking at those. What am I really doing? Am I listening to the podcast? Am I engaged in emails? Am I drinking my coffee? You're not really doing any of it.
right,
You're not present for any of those things.
right.
You're just doing stuff. You're just busy.
Yeah, and so that's why I say podcasts make it worse. I mean,
But
I'm
but
not giving them up,
but
but
could you just have podcast time?
oh, I couldn't do that. Mm. If I'm not, like, running, doing dishes, taking a shower or
Well,
something
so
while I'm
here's the
listening.
thing. I think it's
Yeah,
okay. There are tasks that we do, like in the car, listening to music or a podcast. What's the harm in that? I don't think you're
right.
escaping your life that way.
True.
But the mindless drift off is a real danger,
No, it is. And ironically, a lot of my podcasts I'm listening to right now are about meditation or mindfulness
right?
or these practices. And I am actually currently, and I'll share a little bit of my journey here for our audience. Um, I was introduced to mindfulness or meditation pretty early, like you. In high school, my dad hired a teacher to come teach our it was a guy that we knew at church who, like, was kinda struggling, and he hired him to come teach our family meditation.
Nice.
So, and it was the type of meditation where you get, like, a word, you get, like, a
A
little phrase,
mantra. Yeah.
mantra, and so I had my mantra, and I wasn't supposed to tell him my mantra. I don't know what happened if you tell your mantra, but, um, and I did some of that, and I would repeat that mantra, and, you'd get distracted, you come back to it.
Yep.
Um and it was okay, but as a teenager, it's not like I embraced
That's the
that
thing. You have to be ready. Readiness is such an important factor.
totally.
Mhm.
Um, Later on, I read a book called, How to Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life.
Yeah.
It's a
I love that.
acceptance and commitment therapy, kind of like a next generation cognitive behavioral therapy, but rather than, like, arguing with your thoughts, it has meditation practices where, you just create a little bit of space between you and your
Yeah.
thoughts so that you can stand back and look at them.
It's
And
awareness.
that's
Yeah.
awareness.
Mhm.
So, and you don't have to follow this trail. You can stand back and say, okay, that's fine. I thought that. I'm going to now follow my values and move forward with this. I remember being at Sam's Club. I had a job pushing carts. And then I was in the gas station little hut. I was the guy who'd help you swipe your card if
Oh,
you, like,
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
couldn't figure out your
Couldn't
Sam's
make
Club
machine
card.
work. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a lot of time sitting in that hut, and I would do the exercises in this book. And I remember specifically one night, it was a cold night, and you have to take out the trash at the end of the night. And one of the exercises in the book talked about kind of resisting your current experience versus leaning into it and allowing it to
Mhm.
happen and experiencing it.
Yes.
And I was shivering. It was cold. And I remember instead of there was this moment where I was like, well, what if I just kind of, like, embraced the cold?
Mhm.
And and it was like a slight just mental shift, and all of a sudden I stopped shivering.
Yeah.
It was really weird. I was like, "Oh, okay." Part of the reason that I was shivering was because I was kind of trying to avoid my current
You're
situation.
stuck in that it's painful instead of
Right.
just saying what it is. It's every worldview creates its own world. By the you know what I mean? It's the way you're
Yeah.
looking at it. It's the way you're
Yeah.
looking at it. Absolutely.
And that for me, these were some of the early seeds later on. I did some, breathing exercises in college. I read, what's it called? Eckhart Tolle's,
Power of now.
Power of Now in dental school.
Did you
I remember
understand it?
No, I remember
I c
thinking half of this is absolutely crazy, and then he'll say something just, like, amazing
Yes!
interspersed with it. And
Yes!
and you're like, I can't fully embrace this, but some of this is so good."
Profound, yeah.
Yeah. Um, but I still didn't really start a routine practice. I listened to the book, or read the book, 10% Happier by Dan Harris.
Mhm.
He's the news anchor who had a panic attack on national TV,
Yes.
was deep into drugs and some other addictions, and got to know Eckhart Tolle, a lot of these other people, including Sharon Salzberg, and a lot of teachers, and gradually got to the point where, despite being extremely skeptical,
Mhm.
he embraced meditation and wrote this book, and now has a podcast and has an app, and is one of my favorite resources. And he's even offering, I can't remember if it's free for 6 months for healthcare professionals during COVID
Oh,
19.
nice, yeah.
And I'll try and find the link for that and get it in the show notes for this. But there was another moment in residency where I was pretty miserable. I was doing a 2-year AED residency, and even though
Miserable in residency? You're kidding.
I know, right? Especially because my dental school experience set me up for, like, oh, like, it's not that bad, and now you
Oh,
get the
no.
traditional, like, pros, like, you're doing everything, you're up. I pulled so many all-nighters, through the whole thing.
Mm.
In residency, I got to the point where, I failed the Army's PT test, because in
Wow.
residency, um, there's just not enough time, pulling all-nighters, you're always behind, and then I failed the PT test, and so I got put into remedial PT, so I would have to show up at formation at 6 a.m. You have to have the right clothes and the right, like, Army cap, it's part of being in the Army.
Yes, but it
Um,
sounds like punishment.
well, if you fail the PT test, you
You
go in
get
remedial. It's kind of the punishment. For most people in the Army, showing up for formation and doing group PT is, like, mandatory.
right,
Um, Dentistry gets a little bit sheltered sometimes because either they're in residency or they're in a clinic and you're expected to do it on your own. And it was embarrassing to have failed the PT test. It's like not that bad,
right.
but I let things slip. I had a grader who didn't like my push-ups and all this stuff. But I remember laying there in the dirt because we have these drills and these exercises. So you're literally on the ground, like rolling around in dirt and grass, doing these exercises at 6 in the morning, staring up at the sky and just thinking, like, what am I doing here? And I'd listened to a podcast, about someone who was in a similar, like, miserable situation,
Mhm.
but they chose to lean into it.
Yeah. That's the
Ra
secret. Yeah, it's the
well,
scariest thing in the world to think about, but when you do it, that's the secret.
and I was like, "Can I really lean into this? Like, I'm miserable right now." I
Mhm.
wake up and I ask the question, "Who am I gonna disappoint today?" And it's like, I'm gonna disappoint everyone and maybe not disappoint one person, like, that's my average day.
I know
Uh
exactly. Oh god, it's so terrible, but I get
It's
it.
it's awful. You're
I
just
get it.
behind on everything. Um, and when I leaned into it and I was like, "You know what? Okay, fine. I'm here doing morning PT every day. I'm missing patient care. I'm more behind. I'm frustrated, but that's okay. I'm just gonna get the most out of this. I'm gonna show up
Mhm.
and be here present." And I started meditating in my car on the way to and from PT. So it's like I had this extra commute baked in because I'd have to drive to PT in the morning, do my PT, and then drive home, shower, change, and then be back and see patients, and be back for patient care. And so, eyes open. I'm not
I was
closing
just
my
gonna
eyes.
say, I don't know if I approve of this.
I know. Yeah. I mean, when would there be a better time to be present and mindful than
Then when you're
driving?
driving, but none of us are, let's be honest. I'm not judging that at all.
Right. Right. But for me, that's actually where my practice started, was in residency, and it would be 5 to 10 minutes in the car, every single day, and it immediately started helping.
What was your technique? So, because there's so many techniques, and I can see making a car ride a technique. You really could do that because some of the techniques are really about just paying attention to what's there. So, it's not
Right.
about trying not to hear the noises, it's about hearing the noises, naming them, and letting them pass. So, I could see like a car ride, you could do something similar where you could be like, oh, it's a red car. Oh, with the
Right.
blue car. It's really just an experience of being present with the driving. It's not that you have to, because that's what I think. I go, oh, I don't know, because a beginner
Yeah.
person might think eyes closed, breath in, breath
Right.
out. But so many things can be a meditation, including just blue car, yellow car, red car. Like even that can be a meditation.
And I really like some more of the open awareness
Yeah.
practices where, you start with a breath, but then very quickly you just kind of open to sensation and notice where your mind takes you.
Mhm.
Um, at the time though, I was doing a breath
Okay.
focused meditation. So,
Breath in,
um,
breath out.
breath in, breath out. A lot of times I would do the count to 10
Mhm.
one where you kind of, with the in breath, you do one, out breath, you do two, in,
Yeah. Those
you
are
get all the
fun.
way up to
Yeah.
10
Mhm.
and then start over. And you've gotten distracted when you forget what number you're on,
Yes.
or you find yourself on number like 15 and you were supposed to start over at 10.
Exactly.
But I found that I could do that during a drive.
Okay.
I can breathe and watch the road
Mhm.
at the same time because we do that every
We
time
do.
we're driving anyways.
Absolutely. Yes.
Um, and that, even though it was small and even though, it was often 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes,
It's
it
plenty.
started it started to make a difference, and I started leaning into my situation. Even though it wasn't a great situation, I didn't love it, there was still a ton to be stressed about, it planted a seed.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
it
So much is
Yeah.
seed planting. Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now. I have to tell the story about this because I read that book. So I read that book the first time, probably like you did. I just kind of randomly discovered it. Someone
Yeah.
had told me it was good. And so I
Mhm.
picked it up and I read the introduction. Now, the introduction to me was the most moving part the first time I read it because he talks about being severely depressed. He can barely get off the couch.
Yeah.
He's laying on the couch and he's pondering harming himself.
Yeah.
And then he realizes there's this moment where he realizes that he has something above those thoughts because he goes, who am I talking to? I hate you. I hate myself. I'm dreadful. I'm miserable. I'm depressed. I'm not worth anything. Who are you talking to?
Right.
It was a moment of awareness for him. He found his awareness through his self-loathing, right?
Yeah. Very
But
deep self-worth.
it changed his whole outlook. He's like, "Wait, there's something more here."
Yeah.
And so he discovered that he had this awareness. And then the first time I read the book, the rest of the book was all disappointment to me because I had no idea what he was talking about. It was so foreign to me. And I
Yeah.
tried to read it like 3 more times. I did. I'm like, someone told me this was good and I know the answers are here. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, I
Right.
know the
Right.
answers are in this book. If only I could understand it. And then I had to read it for teacher training.
Mm.
I was like, oh,
Ugh, not
not
again.
this again. And then I read it, and I actually have I have these little books that I keep when I'm reading books for my teaching, and
Yeah.
I like filled a notebook because all of
Mm.
a sudden it clicked. But you're right; it's sometimes you plant the seed. So the introduction planted the seed, but my sprouts wasn't big enough
Right.
for understanding the other stuff yet. So there is definitely levels to this. There's entry points that are very individual. And for a lot of us, it's despair. I hate to say, but
Yeah.
but that's a very common entry point. You're like,
Where I
you
was.
just get sick of it. You're like, I'm just sick
Yeah.
of this, and I know there has to be something else. But then it's still a growth situation, so you don't get it all in a day, and that quick fix doesn't really exist other than in those moments like what you're describing where you're like, I just realized I had to lean in.
Mm.
That's a huge change right there. But we don't get those all the time. We don't have aha moments every 5 minutes. We have lots of, oh God, not this again in between
Yeah.
in between those. But it's all about readiness and it's about finding the translator that works for you. So you talk about that 10% happier that a teacher friend and I were talking the other day, and she mentioned that book, but she mentioned it very like poo poo.
Oh, she
Yeah,
didn't
she's
like it.
poo poo. But I
Uh,
think it's because she feels like it's such a basic teaching. I go, but that's what like 99% of the world needs.
yeah.
We all don't want to go through the 8 limbs of whatever, like we don't want to do that. She's teaching in a very different way, but I just thought it was funny because I hear so many people that enjoy that 10% happier. There's another book called The Happiness Advantage, and I think that's another
Uh,
great. Do you have that
I
book?
read that one as well.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think that's another great entry book. And it really is about, okay, you're not happy. Here's some simple things you can do about that. And it
Yeah.
really is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The hardest part is your own commitment to the process. And your own like, okay, I'm laying on the ground and I'm looking up. We've all had the laying on the ground moment, or at least the two of us on this call have. I remember
Right.
I was pregnant. And so pregnant hormones mess with your brain. And I was gifted
In
enough to
full.
know that that's what was going on most of the time. And I say most of
Mm.
the time because we all slip, right? And so I'd be like, "Oh, crazy thought, pregnancy hormones." Like I could catch it sometimes, but there were other times where it's just overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I was having issues in my practice. I had a legal struggle with the former owner of my practice, and it was just all too much. I
Mm.
was pregnant. I was feeling fat and crappy. And then I had had a bad day at work, and this legal thing was going on. And I'm like, that's enough. And I remember just laying down on the bathroom floor. It was the
Mm.
Eckhart Tolle, I'm a self loathing moment. I was just like, what have I done to deserve this? Because that's always
Yeah.
you do. You think you earned this somehow. You never think it's just life and it's happening to everyone, because that's the truth.
Right. Right.
The truth is, life is happening to all of us. Life contains pain. So accepting that, you're doing yourself a huge favor. I'm not saying you're going to welcome the pain when it comes, but it's going to come. So you should probably expect it. And when it comes, deal with it. Lean in and deal with it. But it's a very scary thing because most of us are spending a lot of time trying to push it away.
And that's the other thing that's been interesting, and I continue to learn even this year. And I unfortunately have to wrap this up here in a minute because I have an extraction that I have to do
Oh,
in
yay.
about
You get to do
half an hour. I know.
dentistry.
I get to do dentistry. It's in emergency care. He's not sleeping, so um, I should be grateful for that. And I am. I earlier on this year, I've identified one of my unhealthy forms of escape for me is video games. And
Mm,
I am one who that's like my teenage default of procrastination and
numbing.
avoiding
It's a numbing behavior.
numbing.
Yeah.
And I've realized this year I said to myself, I want to make progress in this in 2020 because I've binged and purged, and for 3 months I don't touch video games, I'm fine, and then I kind of fall back into it, or I download something on my phone, and they just pull me in, and
Mhm.
that's just my personality. I think Alan and I are fairly similar in that we just kind of get
Sucked
pulled
in.
into things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so but this year, at the beginning of the year, I said, I'm in 2020, I'm not going to buy any new games, but at the start of the year, I'm going to allow myself to kind of indulge. And I did. And I realized that it was literally my anti mindfulness, anti meditation. It was like the more time I spent gaming,
Mhm.
I was undoing some of the positive work and benefits. I became more and more miserable.
Oh,
And
no.
it's something, yeah, no, it was actually quite pronounced where I realized for me, and I understand it's not the way this way for everyone, but some of the benefits of mindfulness are being aware of our current sensations, our current
Mhm.
moment, the current state, being present. Video games are all about pulling you out of your current state and
Right.
into some goal or objective or scenario or situation that is kind of all consuming, and you really feel like you're pulled into that.
Right.
It's also one of the benefits of meditation for me is that uh, letting go of our attachments is a practice within meditation. And instead of saying I want and I want this next thing, that's when I'm going to be happy. Instead, allowing us to kind of let go of the rope on some of those attachments. Video games are all about rewards and achievements and the next
I
thing
can
and
see
and
that. Yes.
progressing. And so I'm actually now on the flip side, I'm about 28 days into a 2-month video game fast where I'm not doing any of it. And I've seen such a difference as I've been meditating more and doing more of the things that work for me and finding other healthy ways to cope with stress. Um, but I think for everyone, it's going to be something different. We all use different things to escape.
Yes. But as long so here's the thing. Sometimes I think there can be a difference though between finding something you enjoy and using it
Right.
as an escape.
Yeah.
So and sometimes we need an escape. Y- y- I do think that. Like, but I don't mean for
I
a couple
agree.
minutes. Do you know what I mean? I don't mean for 16 hours in a row. Cuz I've
Right.
done
And
that. I
that was the issue
yeah.
is it's like, can I have a healthy relationship with this thing? And I've proven to myself over and over that I cannot.
Okay. Yeah. I get
And
it.
so it's like, "Oh, yeah, that it'll be fine this time. I'm just gonna play for, like, an hour," and then it's, like, 3 a.m., and you're like, "Oh, I have to work tomorrow, and now I'm gonna be a worse husband and father for the next
Some
2 days."
people, they use tools to avoid things. So I
Yeah.
do think like video games, lots of TV binging, it's an avoidance mechanism. And
Yep.
our time would probably be better spent dealing with our issue rather than avoiding it year after year after year. So for sure, if like binging the video game is helping you avoid, because I did that in dental school, the game The Sims. Do you remember that game?
Oh, yeah,
That
I
was
love
like,
Sims. We were My wife and I were talking about Sims last night, actually.
I
She's like, "Now I wanna play Sims."
well, I feel like we're in an episode of The Sims right now because we can't leave the house. Like for a long time, you
True.
couldn't leave the house in The Sims, and then they made the one that has town, and you could go to town. But
Right.
that was my way of escaping all of the mental trauma I was having during dental school. I would play it like all night long. When I was
That's
in dental school, I
awesome.
would play
That's
it so much,
hilarious.
and I would eat Smarties.
That's
I
awesome.
would play The Sims and eat Smarties. So I don't think escapism is a great thing, and it generally
No.
leads to trouble. But I think indulgence and enjoyment is okay. So there has to be, you have to identify the things. Am I using this to escape something I really should be dealing with?
Yeah.
Do I just need to turn off the trouble part of my brain for a couple minutes? Because that is a useful tool. Like distracting tools are sometimes useful. We need to get out of the frame of mind we're in and into someplace else. So, that kind of distraction is good. But when you're just sucking your life into something that you're using to escape dealing with issues that need attention, that is absolutely not healthy. That's an addiction.
And I have hired a therapist at this
Nice.
point to as I'm kind of taking a break and stepping back because I wanna make progress on this unhealthy area of my life.
Right.
I feel like it's holding me back in certain areas. Um, and that's why I've said it's a 2-month break. I still play games with my daughter
Right.
who's 6. We still do stuff together. But, um, this conversation that we've had, and I do have to wrap it up here, I wanted people to see a couple different ways that people go on their journey to finding meditation and give them an entry point of, "Hey," and I loved what you said, 5 minutes a day,
Add a minute.
you know,
Yeah.
there's plenty of apps out there, whether it's 10% Happier, Headspace, Calm, there's a ton of them. Um, start something,
Hmm.
and you start to layer and add and learn, and it's a gradual
It
process,
is.
and, um, next time, if you are willing to come back on, which I'm committing to you to
No,
on
yeah, we
air.
have a whole other thing we got to talk about.
Yeah, then we gotta talk about how does this fit into an office and the culture of the office and our ability to relate to each other and communicate with each other.
Right.
Um, so this isn't a complete detour from the theme of this season of the podcast.
No, and here's the a quote from Ram Dass that might help bring that together for what you're trying to make in this season. Ram Dass says, "The best thing I can do for you is work on me. And the best
Mm,
thing that you can do for me is work on you." And that applies to all relationships. That's just not just your spouse or your kids or your parents. That's also your coworkers and your
yeah,
employees. So when you become a better person, you also become better in all of those interactions.
mm,
And meditation practice absolutely makes it easier to be better in every moment. Not every
yeah.
moment, don't get me wrong. We still have those moments, right? But when you work on yourself, that's the best thing that you can do to bring everything in your life forward.
And that's exactly why I love the book and the title 10% Happier, is that it's not overpromising. It's not
No,
saying
right.
you're gonna be a whole new person and we're gonna change the whole world instantly. It's like, you know what? If you can be a 10% better person, be 10% happier, show up 10% more of the time,
Mhm.
then that's actually a massive win.
It is. And it's also a foundation on which you build. All of this
Yeah.
stuff is scientifically proven to change the way your brain works. So, gratitude practice, meditation practice, controlling interactions with people, all of those things are scientifically proven to change your brain. When your brain changes, everything else will too. But it,
There's a book, I'm trying to pull it up here. If you're oh, my Audible keeps crashing every time I open
oh
it up.
no.
If you're the type who needs to, like, hear the science before you can, like, try the
Hmm.
practice, there's a book called, Altered States,
Okay.
or let me think. Crap. It's like altered something traits, something states. But it's essentially the idea that the time on the cushion is an altered state, but it then alters your traits.
Correct.
Um,
Yes.
and it looks at um, both like all the different kinds of meditation. So like there's a loving kindness meditation, there's breath, and there's body awareness
Yeah,
meditation,
they all do
and they
different
actually
things. Yeah.
do different things. So if you're interested, I'm about to pull it up. Altered states, altered traits. I think that's the name.
Okay. I haven't heard of
Um,
that one.
it compiles. Altered Traits is the name of the
Got
book.
it.
Reveal
Okay.
Science reveals how meditation changes your mind, brain, and body, by Daniel Goleman,
There you
um,
go. He's my guy.
and Richard
So
Davidson.
they never say
So,
this. Daniel Goleman is actually part of a larger group of people who went to India in the 60s and 70s and met a man named Maharaji, Neem Karoli Baba. Now, Dan Goleman, so Ram Dass, Krishna Das, David Nichtern, Sharon Salzberg, Dan Goleman, these are all people from the same school. Now, Dan Goleman is
mm,
the scientist. Larry Brilliant is another one. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a physician. He actually helped eradicate smallpox in India.
mm,
He's written a book also called Sometimes Brilliant, and he wanted to call it Sometimes Brilliant, Sometimes Not, but they wouldn't let him. Um, but Dan Goleman, who is like the father of this modern emotional intelligence movement, is part of this whole group. So Dan
yeah,
Goleman, though, is very much science. So like my favorite
yeah,
Dan Goleman book is Emotional Intelligence: Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. If you want science
mhm,
on how this stuff works in your brain, and that's a great place to start. But they all come from this same kind of meditation school, and it's very interesting to see who they've become and how much it's helped them. If you're looking for the leaders of this, they're all in that group. It's wild.
yeah,
It's wild.
yeah. Well, I do have to, like, literally run. I'm gonna have to run upstairs, grab my scrubs, grab my shoes, and run to the
Well,
office.
enjoy. May
But
the force be with you while you extract that tooth today.
thank you. I really appreciate you coming on the
Yes,
show,
and we will do
and
this
we'll
again for sure.
cool. Well, thank you. Take care, Don. We'll see you
See
later.
ya.
Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed getting to know Dawn. She is amazing. You should check out the podcast if this really resonated with you. Um, and we are excited to have her back. You wouldn't, I was hesitant this season on bringing up meditation and mindfulness, but I feel like it has helped me be a better person, more patient, more present at work and at home, and has grounded me. And I guess I shouldn't feel that bad. Mark Costes, he talks about mindfulness and meditation and how that influences you as a leader, as an individual. Um, and so, this is popping up everywhere. Some of the favorite resources that I mentioned in the show, 10% Happier podcast. I love that podcast. Um, and everything Dan Harris has done, including his book. Um, Let me think what else. Oh, the book, the Altered Traits book. That one was really good. If you're interested in meditation stuff, post on our Facebook group. If you have experience with this, or if you've done a retreat, or if you want more info, you want more resources and materials. And I think we can have a great discussion over there on the Facebook group. But other than that, we will talk with you next time on the Shared Practices podcast.